Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode in my new YouTube series, Instructional Rapid using Basic Principles. So if you guys watched the first episode, that game was 10 moves long, and at the end of it I said most games will probably not be that short. And I actually proved myself wrong. I actually ended up winning this game in 9 moves. And I thought this game is actually really instructional because my opponent played in a way that you basically never really want to play. It kind of went against almost every single basic principle out there. So I thought this game would be really instructional to go through. So let's just jump right in here. So my opponent was rated 765, and they started off with e4. I usually never play e5. I play different openings for fun, but e5 is honestly not one of them. But I know a lot of beginners, when they're learning how to play chess, they start off with the king's pawn opening. So I decided to go for e5 myself and just follow the basic principles from there to get out of the opening. So my opponent played f3. Now, f3 is a move that you never really want to play this early on, but especially on move 2 in a position like this. Because when you play the move f3, you completely weaken all the dark squares around your king. So the h4 to e1 diagonal becomes weak, the a7 to g1 diagonal becomes weak, and these make great targets for black. And likewise, if you are playing black, you don't really want to play f6 because this diagonal would become weak and this diagonal would become weak. So same story. And so the minute my opponent played this move, I knew it was going to be a great analysis because a lot of things to learn from this game. So through using basic principles, I thought, okay, let me make use of this diagonal and let me develop a piece. So therefore, I played the move bishop c5, doing both of those things. My opponent played c3. So they keep pushing pawns. I understood why they wanted to play this move though. They wanted to play d4, kind of take control of the center here and kick my bishop. I didn't want that to happen, so I played knight to c6, developing a piece again. You always want to develop your knights towards the middle of the board. And by playing this move, I also control d4 once more, and therefore they cannot play d4 themselves, or they'll end up just losing a pawn. So after this, my opponent played a3. I didn't really quite understand this move. They're not developing any of their pieces here. And I thought, okay, worst case, trying to play b4, but they could have just played b4 here as well before they played the move a3. But even if they did end up playing b4, I'm just going to simply move my bishop back. So I wasn't really worried about that. So after a3, I played knight f6, again following my principles, developing my knight towards the center and getting ready for castling. They played the move b4, and here I chose to move my bishop back to b6. I chose this square over these two squares because here, again, I want to prioritize staying on this diagonal because that's a really strong diagonal for me, and I also prevent my opponent from castling even if they got their bishop and knight out. So move my bishop back here. And now they played g4. Now, they were already kind of moving pawns that didn't quite make sense. They weren't developing, but then they go and play g4. Now, this move is extremely bad because when you play the move g4, you have no defense for your king on this diagonal. Now, I knew the idea immediately because of just a ton of experience here. My goal as black, the minute that I see that this pawn has moved from g2, is to try to get my queen to h4. If the pawn's on g2 and I move my queen to h4, they're always going to have g3 to block me. So it's not as beneficial. But the minute they play g4, again, I said this in the previous episode, pawn moves are committal. You can always move your pawns forward, you can never move them backwards. So now if I were to have my queen on h4, they have no defense here for their king. So I thought, okay, they haven't developed any of their pieces. My bishop's in the game ready for action. My queen is just ready to move to h4. What's in the way? My knight. So let's strike. Played the move knight takes e4. So here, this opens up my queen completely. And after they take, I played queen h4 check, and I was looking for forcing moves from this point onwards. So they played king e2, and the two forcing moves that look good to me were queen f2 check and queen takes g4 check. Now, the first one that I calculated was queen f2 check, because it looked really promising with the bishop right here. But then I saw the king could move to d3, then they could maybe try to run to c2, and I felt that that just was not necessary, and I didn't really see any good check or safe check even to follow up. You always want to try to think at least one or two moves ahead for starting. So I saw queen f2, king d3, what's my next move? Just because I see a check doesn't mean I'm just going to go play it. So then I thought, okay, what about queen takes g4? If queen takes g4, the king has to go back to e1 or d3 if they move, or the knight has to block. So they have three legal moves here. If they move to d3, thank you very much, we take the queen. If they move to e1, I saw a very nice move. I want to take the queen, but I don't want to trade queens. I want to win the queen. So how do I remove the king by force? We use the power of this bishop that's been lurking here the whole time. Bishop f2 check. They have to take, and then we win the queen. And here, we also have a checkmate in 2. So looking at those forcing moves, queen h4 check, the king has to move up, and then we take here and checkmate. If you take on e4 first, it's still winning, but they can block. It's still winning though, but it's not checkmate in 2. So my opponent decided to play knight f3, and it just ended the game quicker. I just took on e4, and I was checkmate. So, really instructional game from my opponent in terms of what not to do. And I really liked using this example because firstly, it broke my record of thinking that the game was going to end in 10 moves. At the minimum, it actually ended in 9. So that was probably the shortest game of the series so far. But also, just to kind of explain, because I see a lot of beginners play f3 or they play f6 or they play it really early before they even castled. And I wanted to explain the cons of playing f3 and why you should avoid it, and from my point of view, how to capitalize on it when your opponent does not follow the basic principles at all. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next episode.